3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
That's last time I was out, I saw this person who could actually surf, and they were on an electric surfboard, but they were obviously just, getting 3 times the amount of laps because they paddling out was effortless for them. And like for me as a beginner, I was like, that's what I need. So I don't constantly exhaust myself trying to get out, and then I've actually got energy to stand up and catch the wave. Anyway, that's surfing. We should talk about biking.
Yeah,
I think there's some parallels here, for sure. Thinking about just defining what we're talking about with e-bikes, and that one of the places I first went was this, in some ways, this sense of a pecking order that Ross is talking about. Like, is there a kind of a priority of like what bike's a real bike? And so I thought I'd start off by asking you guys the questions. What was your first experience as a longtime mountain biker when you first got on an e-bike, e-mountain bike? And how did it feel, and what did you think about it?
That's a cool question. Do you want to go first, Ralph?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I sway more towards motors. I find in the cycling world, usually there's that your core discipline you love, and then you might have your secondary one. And I find a lot of mountain bikers maybe go to the gravel biking or road bike route, whereas that's not for me. I know that. I don't need to do the worst part of my mountain bike ride as the feature to trigger a bunch of gravel bikers. I'm more I love more the adventure side of it, the challenge. So that's why I gravitated towards, say, trials, moto. So obviously as an engine, I do get why people maybe don't like that. The noise, the perception that it's maybe destructive, even though the trials tire is really quite it just sits on the surface of the trail versus moto. So basically when I jumped on an e-bike, I was like, this is sick. Like, I had a grin on my face, could see how it would just give me a lot of what I get from regular mountain biking, but I could get to the top quicker, or do a really cool ride that I would normally do in 3 hours, but just bang it out in about an hour. So if I was short of time, I could see like, this is sweet. Or even for trail building, like I do love going up, whether it's building or helping clear trails. I just love just going out and just doing stuff like that. So if you have a backpack and you have, say, a chainsaw or a couple of tools on the back, way easier to carry with the e-bike. So I loved it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, mine was a little bit more lukewarm because the first e-bike I had was, this is quite a long time ago now, a few years ago for sure, was a Cannondale, and it was a good eye opener for me that like the battery doesn't fix, the motor doesn't fix everything. Like the brakes were crappy, the geometry wasn't particularly good, the motor was kind of jerky, it wasn't very intuitive. So it's definitely like earlier days for like class 1 e-bikes. It was a lot of fun. Like obviously having this free power all of a sudden was like, oh my God, this is amazing. The potential here is cool. But I kind of quickly realized that like I knew pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be super gelled with it until I found one that kind of matched what I expected from my regular bike in terms of suspension, brakes, geometry, like just overall bike design and even the tires as well. I remember that first bike, the tires were crap. But I was really excited. Like initially I was very skeptical. But I've always tried to be someone that recognizes my cynicism and then just does it anyway. Because so many times I'm English, so I'm kind of, I think you come out cynical basically from your mother's womb.
Top 5 on the cynicometer.
Like you're just naturally a bit more cynical than probably most other people. But so I forced myself to like be open-minded, and I knew that once they kind of sorted it out and they put the motor on a better bike, I knew it was going to be something I would want. And sure enough, like couple of years later, I ended up getting a Santa Cruz Bullet, and that for me was like, I felt like that was my first real e-bike for where Ross and I live around Whistler, and I loved that thing. I couldn't stop riding it. What was your first one? Was it the Specialized one?
Yeah, the Levo,
Yeah,
I think it was the second generation. Yeah,
yeah.
second gen. Yeah, we got them here at the university to do it initially to do an environmental impact study
Mm.
that we crafted just to look at the impact on trails and as an emerging topic. And so being a good researcher, I went out, had to go try it, right?
Ah,
So,
what a guy! What a guy!
but yeah, I remember that first ride, like going out and riding a very familiar trail, and like it's giggly fun. It's just
Mm.
like unbelievable how what you can climb, especially around here with the technical climbs that are just absolutely transformed and the gravel roads and all that. And but I remember getting done and kind of looking at my watch, and I'd cut, well over an hour from this loop off,
Mm.
and I sat there and I kind of reflected on the experience of being out in the woods on, a really familiar trail, and it didn't feel the same. Like I moved through the terrain so fast,
Mm.
without the effort, that it felt like a different kind of experience to me. Kind of in the way that going to a bike park versus pedaling somewhere. Had, not that it was good or bad or anything. It just felt really different.
Mm.
And that, now I've, with one in my garage, it's like it's not my first bike that I pull from the quiver,
Yeah.
unless like with as Ross says, unless I'm doing trail work. Like if I'm hauling a chainsaw, I'm on an e-bike. That's just it's a no brainer, and they're so amazing for trail work. So you can obviously get in really quicker with tools, but also like be able to move around. Like when I do a lot of like supervisory work, if there's a multiple crews out, it's really easy to go check in on things. And yeah, it's amazing too. I've got a trailer, a Burley trailer for one of them that we can haul. You can haul
Oh, cool.
diesel fuel in. You can haul in a 5 gallon thing with diesel into an excavator.
Are they those like little one-wheel trailers
Yeah,
on the back? Yeah, with
y-
the
yeah, yeah. The
yeah.
Burley makes one, and the Bob Trailer Company makes them as well. Pretty 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 maneuverable and great to get up to a couple 5 gallon
Yeah.
containers of diesel in.
Well, especially around where you are in North Carolina, like there's some epic. There's a lot of mileage to cover to get to wherever you need to
Yeah.
get to, build the trail or fix the trail or whatever. That
Yeah.
kind of makes me think too of like back to your question. It's like I feel like your first few, and this might be good for the listeners too, is like your first few experiences on an e-bike, in my mind, if I reflect back, are really quite different to when I own an e-bike and I actually spend some time on it. Like, and I think that's where some of the myths or misperceptions can come from. Because if you go out and you rent one for a day, it will be quite a different experience to when you're actually riding one regularly. And because my initial experience, like back to your point, was like, oh my god, there's so much power and it's so easy, and I'm not as tired. But then when I was actually owning one and actually going on rides for myself, you pick your trail, you learn the bike, you learn the motor a little bit, and then you're just as tired, if not more tired, from your e-bike rides than your kind of your regular bike rides. Because you start to sort of feel out how you would want to use this machine to do the thing you love to do, which is to go ride in the forest or on the trails for an hour. I don't know. Can you connect with that or?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I think especially in Whistler where we have a lot of quite physically demanding technical descending, I've never stopped a ride on my e-bike because of the battery. It's because I'm knackered. So that's been interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a good point there about the perception versus reality. whether you've ridden or not. We did we'll talk about this more later, but here in Western North Carolina, they're not allowed in the national forest.
Mm.
Right. There's still considered motorized vehicle, although we do have permission from the rangers to use them for trail work. So it's a bit of the slippery slope there, but this will probably change. Right. Hey, I'm going to go out and do some trail work. Got to do some trail inspections.
I mean, it's good advocacy for trail work. All of a sudden, everybody's doing trail work.
Yeah.
With a Swiss Army knife.
Exactly. Yeah. Some hand pruners. Yeah. For sure. But we did a survey with the riding community here a while back when we started this environmental impact study of people's perceptions about whether they should be allowed in the national forest or not. And the results were really fascinating because you asked the question, should they be allowed in the national forest? And then we also asked the question, do you own an e-bike? And then have you ridden an e-bike? And so we had all these different variables. And what we found was that the people that thought they should not be allowed overwhelmingly had never ridden an e-bike. And the people that had ridden an e-bike thought that they should be allowed. And it like goes right to that perception thing of like, if you haven't been on one, it's kind of hard to understand that the motor is just a pedal assist motor. There's not a throttle on a class 1.
That's key. And I mean, I kind of snigger a little bit because that's classic human behavior, like lots of opinions with no experience, which seems to be going around a lot these days, just as a sidebar. But yeah, I mean, I've heard the same thing in Whistler, and I mean, when I was developing a module for coaches for e-bikes, we have an online coach education course coming out soon for e-bikes with GSMBC. But this started years ago, and I ended up during that time probably riding 3 or 4, 5 different e-bikes, something like that, different e-bikes, all class 1. And that was the overwhelming takeaway I had, was like, it's not a motor, it's not a dirt bike. That the key 2 words are pedal assist. It's just you pedaling with a little extra juice. And in that sense, like, as soon as people ride them, there's no, and that's what the study IMBA found is there's no increased trail degradation or damage or anything like that over a regular bike. They're just not any more damaging than regular bikes. It's just how it is. And as soon as you ride one, you get it.
It enables a regular, fairly fit person to have similar levels uphill speed as a World Cup caliber XC athlete on an XC bike. I remember this summer even I had a private lesson, and it was an XC lesson, and thank God I had my e-bike, because it was with a young girl who was doing like BC Cup XC racing. And if I'd been on my Sentinel, I would have just had no chance. I was in my sort of like mid-range setting on the e-bike, working pretty good, and she was just blasting up the climbs. So it actually worked really well. There was me on the 170 mil e-bike, and she was on a Pinner cross-country bike, and it worked perfectly.
That's kind of cool because, well, and you're really, for listeners that might not know, Ross is a full-time mountain bike coach and coach mentor, and you're really fit, Ross. So that coming from you, if you think of your fitness from like the general population, you're definitely up there, right? It's sort of the top 1-2%. So that says a lot, and I relate that as well, because I remember when I did that ride with you and David, and we went up. Did we do Bring on the Weekend?
Yeah. And he was on his just Evil, and we were on our Bullets.
Yeah, and he was on his Evil, and he didn't just keep up with us. Like, I felt like there were times where he was still ahead of us, and I was still, struggling, or not struggling.
He said that he felt, because I asked him, I said, if I just kind of like get going here and you try and keep up, does that represent a pretty good training pace? And he said absolutely. Having that carrot to chase of me on the e-bike and him, I mean, he was on a decent all mountain bike, I think 160 mil front and rear, But he's obviously comes from a bit more of an XC race background. But I think for him it was quite good because he had something to chase. I was having to really be dialed myself because I couldn't just rely just on power because it was quite rooty and technical.
Yeah.
So it kind of leveled the playing fields of what we were good at in terms of the bike gave me that boost for strength and fitness relative to him. But for him, he had that sort of visual of being able to chase, which I think from a coaching or training perspective can be really valuable because sometimes when you're on your own, you're just going based on how you feel or maybe numbers and stats. Whereas when you have just someone to actually chase, it can spur you on a bit more.
Yeah, totally. Another point to this here, the power the power for some riders can overcome the technical aspect of climbs. Where you've got sometimes the limiting factor on technical climb is just a person's fitness, the power they can put down, and so it can be an equalizer in that case. Where you're coaching a situation where there are a lot of technical climbs, and then that's something that can pay off in the long run for that rider.
And but also I think it can be the other way around, whereas like it can equalize different fitness strength levels for climbing, but then it also can't substitute the technical skill. Like I've seen a lot of people still walking or struggling on e-bikes on technical climbs because they don't have that technical skill for the gradient, the rocky staircase, whatever it is they're climbing up. And I think that's where the magic happens. If you've got a really strong technical background in terms of climbing and routes and steep stuff, and you pair that with a bit of pedal assist power, like that's where they're incredible. But yeah, I've even seen people in Lost Lake, which for Whistler standards is like mellow blue trails, not make it up a lot of that terrain, even though they're on like a $10,000 e-bike. So I think that's one of the misperceptions too, is the pedal assist is going to save you, it's going to get you through everything. But even the up and the down, at the end of the day, you still need the same technical skills, regardless of a bit of extra juice in the pedals.
Yeah, you need to develop feel for your pedal stroke. It's almost like the inverse of braking. So say you had a really powerful set of SRAM Mavens new, but you'd come from guides. If you've developed your technique for braking with guides, but then you go on to Mavens, then likely you'd be locking up, skidding a bit more because you have more power at your disposal. So you have to recalibrate your feel for that power delivery, and the same for a motor versus your own personal power.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't we get into some comparisons between regular bikes and e-bikes? I was coaching this weekend, and I asked the rider if he'd been on an e-bike, and he said with a bit of disgust, no. And I'm like, well, and he's a pretty fit kid, but I'm like, well, why? What's your hesitation? He's like, well, they just don't ride like a regular mountain bike. And, like I don't, like I'm really working on my jumping, and they don't jump like a regular mountain bike. And what kind of curious is how that lands with you all in terms of the added weight. Paul, what do you think?
I feel like if you go from your bike to any other bike, it's probably going to feel it's going to feel different, whether it's better or worse. And a lot of the time, like for most people, they don't like renting bikes because you know your bike and your bike feels normal, right? So even a really expensive rental bike probably won't feel as good as your bike, depending on what your bike is, obviously. And I think that has to be taken into account when people try an e-bike. Is, go back to my point earlier, right? Like if the tires are different, brakes are different, the geometry is different, you might have this opinion of this e-bike, and really it's got nothing to do with the fact that it has a bit of extra juice and a bit of pedal assist. It's all the other stuff. So I think when people swap and they try an e-bike, you have to try, if you can, you've got to try an e-bike that's as similar to your bike as possible, because then that's a genuine comparison. Because I mean, if you take my bike and change the grips and a brake on my bike, I'm not going to like it, and that's my bike, and you've changed two things, right? So that's something to think about. But for me, I would say yes and no. They are exactly the same as, I mean, right now I've good examples. So I have a transition Spire 29er 170 mil, and this summer I had a transition repeater PT, which is basically the Spire with a motor on it. So very similar geometry, travel, reach, all that kind of jazz. But completely different brakes and handlebars and tires. And I didn't gel with it because I didn't like those contact points, but it rides very similar to the Spire. It's just a heavier Spire, which has its pros and cons. But in terms of jumping, trail riding, it was incredible. Like, because that extra weight, there's a reason why people are putting weight on their downhill bikes at the moment. That little bit of extra weight, it's like a Spire with a bit of extra weight on the downs. So more grip, more stability. And then on the climbs, you've obviously got the pedal assist to get you up more of the climbs. And there's a ton of technical climbs where I live in Pemberton, and I love going on the e-bike because it for me, I often don't have the energy or the power to actually pedal up a certain section. But on the e-bike I can. So I get more practice technical climbing on the e-bike than I do a regular bike. The one thing I would say is lifting the wheels. So things like manuals. That for me is the big contrast between a regular bike. If I want to bunny hop and lift the front end, that's definitely where I miss the regular bike. I like manualing and lifting the front wheel and bouncing around and hopping and unweighting. So that you have to adapt for sure. Lifting the rear end, same thing, unless you're using the brake like endos and nose pivots. I don't think there's a big difference with an e-bike, but I don't know. What's your thoughts, Ross? Like,
yeah, it's interesting because I actually
a lot more than me, I think.
Yeah, and I actually did. I made a lot similar. So I've got the V3 Sentinel in a large with a 170 up front, and I made the rear 160 through longer stroke. Yeah, so my e-bike is that repeater powertrain. But because the head angle is a little bit slacker on the repeater, I decided to go, because the bike's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit and therefore more stable as a result. I went for a medium in the e-bike because I'm kind of in between sizes anyway. So that was a conscious decision of mine to know, okay, the bike, because it's pretty slack, it's a heavier. Inherently, it's going to be more stable than the Sentinel, so I will make it shorter to try and add some nimbleness to it. And I have the exact same bars, stem, brakes, shock. The fork is a little bit different. One has a 36, one has a Zeb. I put the same tires on it. So basically tried to keep as much of it as similar as possible. And that was really good. I did end up changing as well to a 27.5 rear, just out of interest. And it definitely helped it be a bit more nimble as well. I rarely had experience with mullet setup bikes, but yeah, I think it definitely helped a lot. But I agree with you. But I would say though, it's kind of dependent on speed. If you're going slowly, e-bikes have they tend to feel a bit more lethargic. Once you get going at a good pace, that momentum, guiding that momentum, the bike will start to feel lighter. You can start using the energy rather than inputting your own too much. Anytime you go slowly, I find you have to add your own energy to get something out more. When you have trail speed, you can do more with less because there's more energy through your speed.
Ross, what did you notice riding some of the technical terrain in Pemberton on your e-bike, like technical downhill?
I mean, it feels more planted for sure, which is good. In terms of, I think, braking distances, I think sometimes you have to factor that into play a bit more mass moving forward. You have to, although you technically have a bit more grip, it's potentially more bike to slow down. But I have 220 rotors front and rear on both my bikes because I don't believe there's such a thing as too much braking power. I'll just squeeze less if it feels too much. But yeah, I like it. And honestly, I mean, back to even, what you were saying before, I actually find that if I'm going on a solo ride, the e-bike is the first bike I will pick.
Really?
Partly just because I know I can do some weird rides or just go and I can just do a big lap that would take me 3 hours normally and just do it in maybe an hour, hour and a half. And because where I'm at with my biking, I prefer more of the adventure style rather than just doing the same trail over and over again.
Yeah, they totally open up that spontaneity
Mm.
aspect where like you're out, an hour or so in, you're like, why not go this way? And
Yeah. Yeah.
especially if you're a place where you don't exactly know what's coming up or what the trail's like, and you're
Yeah,
like,
you don't know if the descent is going to have the reward and you're
right.
less annoyed.
Exactly. You're like, well, okay, no worries. I'm just going to zip back up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a super fun part of it as well. I did notice with with my e-bike the importance of having like really dialed in components. It's like I think
Mm.
my first one had kind of lower end suspension and brakes,
Mm.
and tires, and like those simple upgrades were just on the next
Yeah.
bike where it made it
Yeah.
all the
I
difference.
feel like I'm still trying to figure out how to set up the suspension for e-bikes with that extra weight. Maybe we need to get Steve Matthews from Vorsprung on to help us out with that. But just because I don't really know, from my understanding, I don't know how the weight of the bike plays a role in even just the amount of pressure to use. It seems to move through the travel a bit more easily because I guess the mass is moving and pulling the bike down. So I'm still trying to figure that out because I would say that one thing I do encounter is that especially in the fork, I find myself going through the travel quite easily and then relying on some progressivity at the end. So, but if I then bump up the spring rate, it potentially feels a little bit harsh if I put too much. So I need to get more dialed at that myself.
I think one cool thing that came out of me just developing some stuff for coaches for e-bikes was, and it's so simple when you actually think about it, but like when you think of the total mass of like the rider and the bike and you compare regular bike versus e-bike, it's actually not a big percentage wise, it's not a big increase in weight. But I think a snowboard is a good example. Like if you put me on a 161 snowboard and then you change it and you put me on a 160, that's 1 centimeter. I mean, it's 10 millimeters. It's nothing, but I can feel it. I could probably feel that difference. And it's the same on a bike. So it often, like, they feel really heavy and oh my God, they're so much heavier and bigger. But when you actually boil it down, because the frame really is where the weight is, because the motor and the battery obviously is on the frame. And so that's the sprung mass, and the rider is on top of the bike. And so the rider is part of that sprung mass equation. So yes, it's heavier, but it's a bit like, if you eat a few too many mince pies over Christmas, you're probably going to, chances are you're going to put on half of that percentage increase in weight compared to an e-bike. So I think it's roughly around somewhere between, depending on your weight versus the bike's weight, it can be anywhere between like 6 and 11% increase in unsprung mass.
Does that mean I should put that percentage higher spring rate?
Yeah. So if you're like,
roughly how it works?
Yeah, basically, like if you put on, I don't know, you're probably what, 80 kilos, Russ, something like that.
83 kilos.
Not to publicly advertise your weight or anything.
Pounds or whatever.
Yeah. So if you're about 180 pounds, if you put on 10 pounds over Christmas, 190 pounds, maybe 15 pounds. I mean, you'd have to really chow down to put on 15 pounds for Christmas, but you could probably do it. You would get on your bike and you would probably notice similar things. So it's a bit of a funny thing to say. In one way, I'm saying it's not a very big difference in total sprung mass, but the other side of it is it's enough to make a difference, especially for a discerning rider, someone like us that's ridden, probably for too long at this point. But yeah, and I think that's just a way to help balance for those that have ridden e-bikes or those that haven't ridden e-bikes yet and haven't had that experience. Like suspension setup is a big part of it, and essentially, just set it up for a slightly heavier rider. But yeah, I'd agree. Steve probably has some more polished words to talk on that subject. We should get Steve on and be a bit like, if you were Steve and you had the baby on your back, like it would be
which he does the whole time nowadays.
Yeah.
Wait, let's segue into e-bikes and coaching and how we've used either used e-bikes and coaching or actually coached to e-bikes. Have you all had clients come on to sessions with you all that are like e-bike specific?
Yeah, Ross, you go.
Yeah, I think what the last one I had, it was actually they wanted to learn how to climb better, because I think that is probably the biggest difference. They were they were looping out, having actually quite substantial crashes while climbing, which I think it probably is the biggest difference. So, I think when you have this power, you need to use it well. So that was one of the key things. Aside from that, most of the coaching I've done with e-bikes has actually been me being on an e-bike, but others on regular bikes, and it's either with the youth programs we have where they're young, fit kids, and when you're a full-time coach and you're working 5-6 days a week, maybe on even like a longer stint, I find the e-bikes being transformative for me in terms of just my mental state for coaching, because when you're coaching daily, the physical side of it can really affect your, when you wake up, you feel sort of mentally quite tired. So if I wake up, or even if it's raining outside, and I go, oh, I can use my e-bike, that's awesome, because I can dress a bit warmer.
Right.
And I know that I'm going to have that help from the e-bike, and therefore it can help me deliver a better coaching experience, because basically things like your positioning, all the physical and the tactical components to me demonstrating don't change. I can demonstrate all the things I need to for someone on a normal bike. But I have the energy, the energy I'm saving through the motor almost comes to my mental state, which has been amazing. So I actually think that is the single biggest reason why I have an e-bike for work, is that.
Yeah, I'd echo that. And it's simple things you kind of don't think about until you're there and you're coaching. And like, the last time I was coaching on one, there's a loop on Blackcomb that we often take kids or clients to, and it's like I don't know, through 2-minute downhill, and then you can loop back up the road, and there's a couple of other little sections within that. And I kind of suddenly realized halfway into the lesson, like, wow, I'm doing 3 or 4 times as many demonstrations for them, because it's so quick and easy for me to loop back up. But then also like things like me setting up to film them, that suddenly became easier, because I was just able to move around and I'll just climb back up there. And so it does increase your capacity to be more adaptable, I think, when you're coaching, whether the clients have e-bikes or not. It's just as a tool for you to do your job. And Ross's point actually made me laugh with the clothing, because I've been caught out a few times where I've just been cold all day on the e-bike, because I dress like you think you're going to be warm and exercising all day, and then because you're coaching, it's a little bit more mellow, and just put on an extra layer if you're coaching on the e-bike if it's a chilly day. but that's different on my own rides. Like, I think I go back to that point earlier. Like, if I'm not coaching, and maybe this is a point we can get into later, but like, I feel like I'm working out just as much as if I'm on my regular bike, because I'm still looking for that same physical experience. You know, I think there's a misperception that you just sit and chat and you don't work out on the climbs on e-bikes. And sometimes you do socially for sure, but you could do that on any bike. But I think a lot of the time I'm working out just as much, if not more, on the e-bike. And I would argue that even I actually get a better workout on the e-bike because I'm not redlining and then stopping, having a break, redlining, stopping, having a break. I can just keep a really consistent cardio, or my zone 2 or whatever zone I want to be in. I can really control that a lot more on the e-bike. And I think that's partly why pros are training on them, because they can control their zones a lot better. They can actually get a better workout on the e-bike. Otherwise, they're kind of a bit more limited to road bikes or gravel bikes. But yeah, anyway, back to coaching. Ton of fun, and it really opens the door. And I think with Ross's point too, like I can definitely see a future where more and more people are coming to get lessons on how to climb on e-bikes, because that for me is there are some differences obviously on the descents and stuff like that, but the biggest one is the climbs. And I've definitely had to do a lot of self-learning on how to handle a e-bike on the climbs.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest revelations there with climbing is the like slower speed, like Ross was talking about, and the how ratcheting works and doesn't work, and momentum for chunky terrain, and as a lesson in and of itself, and then how to use your rear brake as a clutch for steep uphill corners, which we have a lot of here, you know, and like that, because if you just pedal, even if you shift down to like the low setting, you know, you're gonna careen the bike off the trail in some of these slow tight turns, and developing that sense of the rear brake can be like a motorcycle clutch. It's pretty cool. The other thing that I've seen, I've got a long-term client on an e-bike, and the repetition that we can get in 3 hours, you know, we can get to the top of our park, which is pedal access, and it's not a big deal to do, you know, 3, 4, 5 laps, you know, where it's, you know, maybe 2 is reasonable on a pedal bike. You know, and so we've got all this more physical and mental bandwidth than to actually focus in on the teaching and the lessons, and not just, you know, the physical grind of getting up there. So that's a huge perk, and definitely look forward to those days where I'm coaching on e-bikes purposefully.
Is that Rocky Knob?
Yeah,
Yeah, that place. I was just thinking, like, as you were saying that place is perfect for it.
totally.
If you're coaching e-bikes there, like, man, just the mileage you can get with your client is huge.
Yeah, and you can turn all the terrain into up or down, and it's not a big deal, or most of it, right?
Yeah.
Jumping, and have you all coached jumping on e-bikes?
Not so much, because obviously we've got the bike park here, so
Yeah.
most of our jump lessons tend to be in the park. But I think, you know, just even from a physics perspective, just with basic jump technique, I think the cool thing about e-bikes is that they're potentially even safer to jump. The weight offers stability, and because most of the weight is centered and low, I think there's less opportunity for a rider's mass to affect the fore-aft positioning of that pressure through the transition. So I actually think they have the potential to jump like safer.
Yeah, a few years ago I was teaching at one of our dad's programs, and it was we weren't in the bike park for that program, so I was teaching jumping on the little river dirt jumps, those little gap jumps, and I took the e-bike for a bit of a laugh. And what was cool about that was the amount of laps I could do just sprinting up and down and either for demos or for them to follow me. Like it was a lot of fun on the e-bike, and there's no way I could have done that many laps, and almost like every lap I had a different student like following me or watching me or something. But I was a little nervous about these short, kicky, small gap jumps on how the e-bike would feel, and I was really surprised. Well, not surprised, but yeah, I guess I was surprised just how stable and easy it felt. I thought it might be a bit more of a pig, but yeah, just riding smooth, using the bike's weight to do some of the press, and then just being agile with like absorbing the bike and being a bit more proactive with like absorbing the bike, because obviously it's heavier and it does tend to want to just go like forward in the air, and it doesn't want to go quite in that sort of nice round trajectory of a jump. So letting the bike load and then just being a bit more proactive to absorb the bike. But other than that, it felt I felt like the bike did a lot of the work for me. It was cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think we do a lot of jumping lessons here on e-bikes, because we don't have the bike park the way that you all do. One kind of a segue into the equipment setup and some nuances here. I had an experience recently where I've been playing around with the overrun and the settings on mine, and had forgotten that I'd had it set the way that it was, and went onto a jump line and nearly backflipped because you got to stop pedaling. The bike kept its overrun going.
Really?
Yeah, as I went up it like you had to do an emergency quasi Superman to get things back into control. It's pretty scary.
What's the overrun?
How long it stays pedaling after you release pressure from the pedals?
Oh, I didn't know that. You can adjust that on the lever. Oh wow.
Yeah, so if you get into the app on the Levo, you can adjust all the percentages of everything. So you 3 modes, and then you can tell it how much power overall to give, how much pedal force or pedal contact force do you want, and all those things are manipulatable. I think if you're working with a client on an e-bike, it's important if they have those settings to understand how to manipulate them and choose them based on their riding and what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I ended up nearly every bike I've had, I've ended up increasing the eco mode a bit, and then that's usually the thing I've done, because the eco mode is so mellow. If it's too mellow, I end up using trail mode too much of the time. So I just bump up the eco mode a little bit, and then 9 times out of 10 I'm on eco mode, unless it's like a really steep, long, just gravelly road. I'm like, yeah, screw that, I'll just boost up that.
So I've set my eco mode through just kind of intuition to simply overcome the bike's weight. And so it's feels like I'm riding a normal bike, and I've done that on purpose to ride with people that aren't on e-bikes.
Oh, cool.
Which I think is a cool entry into maybe talking about etiquette, e-bike etiquette, and a bit of like the community aspect of that. Because around here, with the access being limited to bike parks that allow it, and certain places that allow it, and the national forest, which is where the vast majority of the trails are, is off limits. There's a bit of a social dynamic among e-bikers, because people still ride them out in the national forest, and it's a bit taboo. It's a lot taboo, and so there's a lot of kind of etiquette disputes and who has right of way, and people will show up on e-bike to a group ride and get dirty looks and or apologize for themselves. And so there's a bit of a new kind of social function here, at least, where I think it's important for especially the professionals in the field to like be really good ambassadors for how to role model just being good mountain bikers in general, whether you got a motor or not. Do you all see that in Canada at all, where you are with this? I haven't experienced it there, but I was wondering, you guys.
I think Whistler's definitely had a little bit of a slow uptake, but I think now what you're seeing is, we got to remember it's still a very young sport relatively, and mountain biking as well. And so I think what we're seeing now is people who are actually similar to Paul's age, my age, people who moved here in their 20s. They've laid down a life here and they've started families. There's all these like ripping riders who used to just smash out endless laps in the bike park, but now they're busy dads with their work as well, and they're turning to e-biking. So I think it's becoming more popular in that sense. I think there's less restrictions in Whistler. Right now there's only the Alpine trails on Sprout that aren't really sanctioned for that. But the main reason for that is purely just because it was a really easy double track climb to get up into the Alpine. And normally for a relatively fit person on a regular bike, it would take from the valley floor to get there to the top about 3 to 4 hours. It's about 1,400 meters of climbing. So the reason they've banned them is because if you just say to a load of people, hey, you're allowed up, you can get up there in an hour and a half on an e-bike, and it's not that arduous. So if you've never mountain biked and you don't really have that experience to be in what is essentially a very wilderness setting, and then all of a sudden you have quite a technical downhill to go down that's very long, that's a bit of a risk, and they don't want to necessarily overwhelm the search and rescue component to it. So that's the reason for it. But I think I agree. Like, I think in terms of etiquette, and if we kind of tie it to coaching, I think it's our responsibility as coaches to try and educate people who might have never mountain biked before, but who've joined this world through e-biking, that there's a certain etiquette to trails in terms of climbing, especially. If you're on a quick ride and you're blasting up a single track, and then you come up upon a group of people on normal bikes going slower, I believe the etiquette should be go down to their speed many meters before you even approach them, and then just say, hi, how's it going? And even just let them dictate when you go past. I think, to me, that's the best etiquette. If you just come in full guns a-blazing and shout, rider up, that's just rude. And to me, this is the single biggest obstacle that people who use e-bikes should be mindful of. All the other stuff in terms of riding or perceived damage to trails is insignificant as far as I'm concerned. It's this social etiquette component which is the biggest obstacle. And the more that people who ride e-bikes can just be nice and be aware of that etiquette, I believe more places will open up to ride. The other thing is, if you have the option of a road, typically e-bikers will go roads because it's quicker anyway. Right. But if that road has traffic up it, then remember the road is built for the cars. So you got to have etiquette for the cars. So yeah, I mean, I could go on a rant about this as a semi-rant, but yeah, if you're the type of e-biker who just blasts up and doesn't care, then you're part of the problem as far as I'm concerned.
Well said.
Yeah, well said. I agree too. I think a lot of this stuff too is facts are facts, and the facts come out in the wash eventually. Like with more time, people will realize that the pedal assisted class 1 bike just it's not damaging the trail any more than a regular bike, and I think that already is coming in, and that's why so many areas are open to class 1 e-bikes, and yeah, and so it boils back to the humans, right? Like, and user groups working together. And I think the funny thing with e-bikes, I said this on a webinar the other day, is like, when I'm riding an e-bike, especially a few years ago, I'd pass someone up invariably in Whistler, there's a lot of steep gravel road climbs. So if you're not on an e-bike, chances are you're suffering as you're going up there. And you'd pass them on the e-bike and you would get some sniggers or comments. And I remember one day I said to these guys, they were like, oh, that's not fair. And I was like, dude, I live here. I've been riding up this pain in the ass climb for like 20 years. Like I'm not a different user group. I'm a mountain biker, to Ross's point, that now happens to have an e-bike. Like I'm in the same group. I'm in the same room as you all. I just happen to have a bit of pedal assist with me this day. So I think from that human centric point of view, is just remembering that we're all bikers, that happen to have different bikes. We're not different people. We're not e-bikers and mountain bikers. We're just mountain bikers, and what bike are you riding that day? And that helps, if we all look at each other and we remember to look at why we're in the woods, and really we're the same people. We've got more in common than we have that's different. All of those kind of basic human skills, people skills, social skills. I think that's, to Ross's point, that's key. We just gotta, don't be a jerk, and eat donuts and be happy.
I think that's a great place to wrap this up. Ross,
yeah, you can eat donuts more when ride e-bikes as well.
Exactly. You do. We can do.
I don't know. I feel like it's the other way around.
You could do both.
Yeah,
you could do both at the same time on an e-bike. You can ride bikes and eat donuts on e-bike.
Yeah,
easy. Andrew,
to be fair, 2 days ago I was on the island riding, and there was 2 guys on normal bikes, 1 guy on an e-bike. They're midway up the climb, and then the 2 guys on regular bike set off, and the other guy just lights up a cigarette and just starts pedaling on his e-bike.
That's awful.
Pretty funny.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that wouldn't be good etiquette, is if you could ride past someone eating a donut whilst they're panting and puffing up.
Then they're jealous for 2 reasons: the speed of your ascent, and then the fact you're having a tasty donut.
Yeah. Just be good people. Be good bikers.
That's it. That's it.
Because I mean, that's a joking aside. That's all the other. Also, the other side to it is people are jerks on regular bikes.
Yep.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? There's 100%. Jerks in every user group. There's jerks in the bike park.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, just
it's actually funny when I go trials riding, and sometimes there's trails that were built by trials riders, used by mountain bikers. If I'm coming up the trail, if I bump into a mountain biker, depending on who that person is, they might look down upon you, or they might get mad because they think that that's their trail. If I approach someone and they happen to be on an e-bike, I almost have a sigh of relief, going, "Oh, okay, they're a victimized group as well." So
victimized group,
sharing that.
Awesome.
But then if you come across a hiker, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. Ross, do you have any new donut stories for us?
No, unfortunately not.
That was the rule of coming on. You needed.
Oh, it was. Oh.
Well, I'll ask you.
I got gifted part of a donut from my friend Ben Arnott on a trials ride the other day, and it was great. I think it was a Squamish shop. I forget what it was called, but I'll give a shout out to Sunflower Bakery in Squamish if anyone wants a great donut. Ryan Newton, he's your man. He's
my favorite.
Yeah, they're great.
Which part of the donut were you gifted?
It was
the bit that fell on the floor.
Yeah, it was a bit of a classic. It was one of those just sugary ones. I'm not as much of a connoisseur. I'm kind of like all donuts, so
good.
I don't discriminate.
Well, thanks, guys. This has been awesome. Talking about e-bikes.
Yeah.
Just go ride e-bikes soon.
Thanks for coming on, Ross.
Yeah. All right.
No worries.